Okay, guys, let's continue on with my Sinister 6 rankings with my Part 4, which is number 20 through 11. And this one is where it gets really hard. This is where it gets really difficult with the rankings because I really love a majority of most of these films in these 6 franchises, which, again, if you are new to this, check out my other 3 parts because it is 50 films, 6 franchises, Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Chucky, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and Scream. And with these franchises, they're, for the most part, all nostalgic to me, too. But when push comes to shove, it got really hard in the top 20, because the top 20 for me were really... There were so many that I would want to pick over for nostalgia, or just love watching it over and over again. But there's also ones that I want to put that are just good movies, but I also don't want to rank them up high if they're not my favorite to watch. So you'll see where all these rankings lie in this part. So again, part 4. Now my number 20 would be Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Yes, my favorite Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And actually, I have ranked every Nightmare movie on this ranking already. This is my number 1 Nightmare movie. So the Nightmare franchise barely made it to the top 20. And I do love this franchise, but it's the one out of that's really rewatchable, or really not really rewatchable for me. In terms of like the franchises, this is one of the franchises that I really don't rewatch much. Like, whenever I do, I love them, but the Nightmare franchise, I don't rewatch a lot. So that's why they're way lower, and again, it almost didn't crack the top 20 with New Nightmare, which is my favorite Nightmare movie. For reasons I will explain, in which New Nightmare to me is, in terms of filmmaking, is really good. In terms of doing a unique take on this film franchise is really good. Having it sit in the real world, having it sit in this kind of meta-textual, like how they made the movie, in which it is real-life actors, Heather Langenkamp playing herself, and her son and her husband start to encounter Freddy Krueger in the real life, like he actually is real. And the movies are just fake in this film, but that is a really cool idea. I really like the performances, I really like the creativity, I really like the creepiness. I feel like this one is probably one of the creepiest out of all of them, even though the first 2 Nightmare movies are really genuinely creepy as well. But this one, because it goes for a more realistic take, I feel like this one, for me, is one of the most creepiest, and I really do love the performances overall. I like the kills, even though there aren't that many, but I like that there aren't many of them because you focus more on the characters, as opposed to just a kill every, 5-10 minutes. And in the Nightmare franchise, I feel like that's more important than, Friday the 13th, where the Nightmare franchise has a little more plot. So, I understand not having as big of a body count, so I'm fine with that. So, I really love New Nightmare. New Nightmare is a great Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it is my favorite overall out of all the films. And then my number 19 would be the original Child's Play. Now, this one is hard to put in this spot because I love this movie. I love the Chucky franchise. Love the first movie. Love Alex Vincent and Catherine Hicks and Chris Sarandon. They're all great in this movie. I love how this one, even though you know that Andy isn't a killer, they have the idea that maybe he could be at the beginning of the movie, but you know he isn't. And the way that they slowly edge you in on Chucky being truly alive, I think, is actually really well done. And the moment where he freaks out at Karen Barkley is really well done and really intense and suspenseful until it happens. And when it happens, it's great. It's funny, too, because Chucky is a funny, scary character. And I really do love Chucky in all the movies. And this one is definitely the starting point, and I still love this one, but I don't love it as much as a couple more that I will put on top of it for the Chucky franchise. But as is, Child's Play 1, I think, is still a great horror movie, and it's still, for its day and age, it still is great. Even though some things are a little dated about it, it still is a great, really great first movie in the Chucky franchise. And then my number 18, another original movie, which is Friday the 13th, the original. Now, this one, I love the fact that people really like Jason, and I understand that. But I love the fact that this is a movie that came out of nowhere, that was just about these campers getting killed, And then you realize that it's a vengeful mother killing off these teenagers who, even though they weren't part of Jason's drowning, she just wants to kill off all teenagers in the area to have them not have a crime be committed again, like a kid's drowning. And the movie is ridiculous and exploitive. It is. But I really do love this movie. I do like these characters a lot. Honestly, I remember all of them. A lot of people say they don't remember these original characters, but I really do like them all. And I think they're all really kind of relatable and feel like real life characters, as opposed to horror movies later where they feel telegraphed and they don't feel real, like they feel like cliches. This one, they don't feel as much cliches because they didn't have much to work with. They just acted like their normal selves. So all these characters in this movie and the actors are all really good. I really like them a lot. And Betsy Palmer gives an incredible performance for thinking that the script was a piece of shit and she wanted to make this movie just to get a car. That is so funny that she is that devoted. Even though she hated the script, all she wanted was money. But she gave a damn good performance in this movie that actually works in its favor for a horror movie like this to have a great performance. And the effects are good, even though there aren't that many. But I like the fact that this is a tension building movie as opposed to just kill, kill, kill movie. Like there are like 5 or 6 kills in this movie, but I love the fact that this one takes its time, and the other ones, the couple after this do to an extent take their time, but this is the one that does take its time. It's like John Carpenter's Halloween, and it was ripped off from Halloween. And they blatantly say it, that they ripped Halloween off in this movie, and they wanted to just do another slasher movie, but with gore this time. So I really do love the first Friday the 13th. This is a really fantastic movie, and again, this is very hard to rank these films, because the Friday the 13th films are really, really fantastic, and it's just, like the first 6 I think are fantastic, and it's hard to choose between the first 6. So, spoilers, they're all going to be after this, the rest of the first 6 movies. 2 through 6, but really love the original. And then my number 17th is Friday the 13th Part 2. I felt like this one, even though the first one is a great slow build horror movie, this one it ups the body count, it ups the ante, and I think that Ginny is the best final girl. Like, I think she is really, really awesome, and I know a lot of people love her, and I'm glad that people do, because Amy Steele in this role, like, she gives so much for so little, if that makes sense, because this is just an exploitive horror movie. Like, she's just there to be the final girl. But you actually have her feel sympathy for the killer, for Jason, and I actually really like that, because you actually get more than just, oh, here's killings, here's people getting killed, and here's effects, which I like, but I do love the fact that we get a great final girl and a great character that, to me, is one of the best final girls ever, and I love Amy Steele in this movie, and also in April Fool's Day, which I just rewatched this year as well for April 1st. She's just really great in horror, and she wasn't in a lot of horror, but those 2 movies in particular, I really do love her in. But the kills are good, the gore is good in this one. The body count, like I said, is upped. There's some good kills. And I do like that this one just did everything the first movie did, but more of a faster pace. Even though I love the slow burn pace of the first one, this one I like a little more by a tad, not by much. But I do really love Friday the 13th Part 2. And then my number 16, this is kind of controversial with where I put this movie and all these other movies that come after it, but Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, is my number 16. I do love this movie, don't get me wrong, I do love this one. I love the fact that this is one of the most fun horror movies, one of the most fun slashers ever. Like, all these characters are really fun and really likable and really, again, genuine. Like, the first 4 at least Friday films felt very genuine with the actors and how they felt like everyday kids. And I guess they do in 5 and 6 too, but I felt like 4 did a great job of kind of perfecting that, because these kids are all really likable and feel really relatable as well. And the gore in this is fantastic. Like when Axel gets that saw like on his neck, or like the girl with the banana gets like the knife through her throat, or like the corkscrew thing where like he gets like the corkscrew through his hand, Crispin Glover. all these kills, I think, are really, really incredible. And Tom Savini came back. I love that he came back again, and he completely again upped the ante like he did from the other one he did. So I really love the gore as well, and I love the ending. I love how Jason, even though of course there's been like four Friday the 13th movies that, whether they say final in the title, there are at least four of them that they wanted to end it on. Like, they wanted to end it on part 3, they wanted to end it on part 4, and then they wanted to end it on Jason Goes to Hell, I guess. So it's funny that this is not the final one, but it felt final. Like, even though we get all the sequels after this, it felt final with Jason being killed. Like, there was no way he would come back, except in a ridiculous way like he did in part 6, which I love. So this did feel very final, and just, again, everything about this movie is awesome. I really love the final chapter. And then my number 15 would be Wes Craven's Scream. Now, Scream, to me, is one of those movies that people love or people hate. I completely understand why people look at it from, like, why are these people being so self-aware? And it annoys people that the characters are self-aware in the movie. Like, oh, if you say I'll be right back, you get killed, or if you have sex, you die. Like, those jokes, people look at it and go, oh, I don't, like, a lot of people don't like it because it's self-aware. And it's not as much to the extent as, like, Scream 3 and 4, where they're just so much on the nose of, like, here's what we're doing, here's the self-aware joke we're doing. Like, this one, it did have self-aware jokes, but in a way where it felt more genuine than, like, 3 and 4. And really love the characters. Again, talking about badass final girls, Sydney. Sorry, not Cindy. Sydney. I was trying to say that, but actually I didn't mean to say that. Sydney is one of the best final girls in any horror movie. I think that she has, in all 4 of her movies, she has one of the best, like, final girl, like, story arcs. With all the shit that this character goes through in all these movies, like, she is a badass. And I like how in this first movie she is a badass at the end of the movie, but she has to build on becoming that, because we've got a great story arc for this character where she loses her mother. Her mother was raped and killed allegedly by Cotton Weary, but then you realize at the end, spoilers, that her boyfriend Billy and Stu, his friend, they both are killing all these people off. And I love the fact that Billy doesn't really have a motive, but he does. He has the motive that his mother left because Sydney's mom was a quote-unquote slut that went and slept with everybody. So Billy's dad slept with Sydney's mom, and then his mom left him, and that's why Billy is going around killing all these people. The hero and the villain are both fantastic. Like, Sydney, again, is a badass final character, and Billy is I kind of want to say sympathetic, but I also don't, because he's also just a piece of shit. And that's what a lot of these Scream villains are, even though it's fine. But he is a piece of shit. Like, I understand that his mother left him, but he killed all these people. Like, that's fucking horrible. But Skeet Ulrich is awesome as Billy, and Matthew Lillard as Stu is fantastic. He's so hilarious. He's got great humor, especially towards the end. And then all the other characters are really awesome as well. Dewey and Gale, they're great, and they continue on through all 4 movies. And Tatum and Randy, like, they're all likable main leads, and they have that sense of style and sense of humor that works perfectly for me. And the first 2 Scream movies for me keep that kind of in reality, like, meta jokes, while 3 and 4 are more over the top with their jokes. Like, here's the meta joke we're giving in 3 and 4. In 1 and 2, I feel like they do it way better. So I love everything about Scream. I love the gore, I love the characters, and the opening scene is one of the best opening scenes in any horror movie. One of the best opening scenes, one of the best final girls, good gore, great characters. Really, really love Scream, and that's why it's my number 15. And then my number 14 would be Curse of Chucky, which is one that people do like. People do really enjoy this one. After Seed of Chucky, which a lot of people hated. Not going to deny that. A lot of people hated Seed of Chucky. We got, 9 years later, we got Curse of Chucky, which continues on with the Chucky films, with Seed of Chucky still in continuity, but it goes through the darker roots. And I really love all these characters in this movie. I love Nika. Nika is a great new final girl, and she's great in both Curse and Cult. And I really like all the other characters. I think that they are perfectly played as obnoxious or like assholes, and I really like how they play their performances. Like, I love the actress who played Barb. Like, she is such a love to hate her character because she's so mean and so spiteful, but her performance is so likable. Like, I really like this character. And the gore is really good. And again, I really like how this goes back to the first movie in more ways than one. It goes back to the first movie where Chucky doesn't talk for like the first like hour of the movie, like the first movie, and then also it continues back to how Nika's mother and Charles Lee Ray had a relationship as in he gagged her and like tied her up and kept her as like a slave. But it's got one of the most incredible scenes in any Chucky movie where Charles Lee Ray has Nika's mom tied up, and she calls the police and screams at him how she destroyed his family, and Charles Lee Ray stabs her in her pregnant stomach and paralyzes Nika for life. So Nika has had, even though she has not known Chucky ever, she has had technically a relationship with him because of what he did to her. He paralyzed her, and he tortured her mom and killed her mom at the beginning of this movie. So I really love that. I really love all the characters. I really love how theatrical this feels for a direct-to-video movie. It feels incredibly theatrical. These characters are all fun, interesting, and likable. The gore is really good. Chucky is great. He's got great banter. He's really, I like how he's, again, in the darkness for most of the movie. So, love Curse of Chucky. Curse of Chucky is one of my absolute favorite Chucky movies. And then my number 13 would be Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Now, this one is just balls to the walls fun. Like Tom McLaughlin came in, watched all 5 of the previous Friday the 13th movies, and he said in an interview that he came in, watched all of them, and then thought, what do I do now since we did all those other movies that are basically the same thing, whether you like them or not? He came in and did it in a self-aware way. And again, relating to Scream, Wes Craven actually commended this movie and Tom McLaughlin for actually inspiring Scream a little bit with the self-aware sense of humor that this movie had with these characters and with how they are silly and how they are fun and how they relate to like the cliches of horror movies. And I love how this movie like inspired Scream. That's really cool. And I really love the fact that this, even though it unabashedly kind of ignores Part 5, which I love, it's weird because I still love how it continues on with Tommy Jarvis because he's got this story arc where in final chapter he's a little kid who kills Jason. In Part 5 he is a almost adult going insane, and then in Part 6 apparently he's cured, and then he goes back to try to kill Jason for good even though Jason's been dead and buried, but a lightning bolt like hitting a spear brings Jason back, which again, that's Tom McLaughlin's was his intent on the movie. Make it funny, make it self-aware, and make it really silly. And there was humor in other Friday movies, like in Part 5. Part 5 has really over-the-top characters. But this one had the humor in a different way, where it was like, we're doing very self-aware jokes. Like whenever his wife, Nancy, that character in the car with Tony Goldwyn, like those two characters in the car where Jason comes in and like stabs them, like with a spear. Like, she's got a line where she says, I've seen enough horror movies to know that this guy is probably up to no good. Like, Jason's up in front of their dash, like, with a freaking spear, and she says that line. And that's the really fun charm of this movie and the self-aware way that they talk with these characters. And it's so fun and so likable. And the gore is really good. Really like Tommy Jarvis. Tom Matthews did a great job. He was a great continuation, even though there are 3 different Tommy actors. He is great in this movie, and he's a great continuation of the other 2. And Megan is a great final girl. Like, I love Megan. She's so funny. She's so likable. I think she's kind of underrated because Tommy is the quote-unquote final person, but this was the... Well, I guess this is the 3rd Friday movie where they had 2 people live, or 3 people live, because Part 5 had 3 people. But this one had 2 final characters, which that trend would continue on after this in Part 7 and Part 8 and Part 9. So I just love everything about this movie. This is one of the best Friday movies because of its self-aware humor, because of the gore, because of the characters, because of just how fun it makes fun of itself in a way that's so charming. Everything about it is just charming. It's a great horror movie. I love Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives. And then my number 12 would be Bride of Chucky. This one, and I just rewatched this one because I just got the VHS tape. I bought it online because I saw it cheap. And I own it on all other platforms already, but I wanted to buy the VHS. But Bride of Chucky, again, my point is I'm saying I just rewatched it. I really love the hell out of this movie. Ronnie Yu is such a stylish director. Like with Freddy vs. Jason, whether you like it or not, he has made a very stylized movie. And this one he did the same thing, where he really revamped Chucky, where the first three movies were, in a way, essentially the same movie. They were literally almost the same, just in different locations. Which, for most horror movies, that makes sense. They're going to be the similar movies. But Bride of Chucky, while the first three Chucky movies, Chucky had humor, in Bride of Chucky, they fully embrace the silliness and the goofiness of this killer doll, and they bring in Jennifer Tilly as Tiffany, who is one of the best and most awesome like characters in the Chucky franchise and in any horror franchise. Jennifer Tilly is so funny. She's so likable, even though she's a psychotic killer like Chucky is. She is so likable. The gore is really great. The self-aware humor is really great, and it's very meta. It came out after Scream, but it still works in that way of how this humor just works incredibly well. Really love all these characters. Really love all the gore. Really love all the effects. Really love the style of the soundtrack. I've got the soundtrack to listen to in my car. Like, it's such a badass soundtrack as well. Everything about this is incredible. It's one of my favorite Chucky movies. So that's why it is my number 12. And then my number 11, controversy, is Halloween H2O. This one, for me, I completely get why people don't like this movie. I get it. I understand. This is not a scary Halloween as opposed to the other ones, where you look at this movie. I'm looking at this movie more on performances, and I love Jamie Lee Curtis. I think that she gives, again, like I said with some of these other people in this ranking, she gives so much for so little. You feel the world for this character. You feel the world for her going through being 20 years on the run, being literally just tortured tortured, drugging yourself, drinking all the time. She's abusing her habits, and she is just in a rut. And she's got a 17-year-old kid who is basically taking care of her because she is that much in a traumatized situation. And it feels like it'll never go away for her. And it really is truly sad, and her performance is just truly moving. That scene where she breaks down and tells Adam Arkin, her boyfriend in the movie, she says to him that who she is, and how Michael has he waited in the sanitarium for 15 years for her, and then he broke out, and then she knows he's coming back again because she realizes that her son is 17, just like she was in the first movie. So it's like fate. It's happening again. I love this character so much in this movie, and it's hard to choose between this version of her or the 2018 Halloween because I love her in both versions. But she is truly moving in this, and I like all the side characters. I think that they all feel like they would have come out of the first movie. Like, Josh Hartnett as John is a really likable character who is a 17-year-old teenager who is literally watching over his mom, taking care of her because she can't do anything. She's that traumatized. And I really like Molly. Michelle Williams is great in one of her first. I think, is this maybe her first movie role? I know she did Dawson's Creek, but I don't know if that came out before or after this because I never watched that. But she's really great, and I really like Sarah and Charlie. Like, they're fun, silly, goofy characters, and they all look like they're real kids. They don't look like Abercrombie models. Like, these kids actually look real. And again, it feels like the first movie again with how likable these characters are. And they're so interesting, even whenever there's not gore. And there's not much gore in this movie, but I do respect that because they're trying to be like the first movie again. they're not trying to be just full on gore all the time, because if there's too much gore, it's just over excessive. And this one, I love the fact that there isn't much, and the final act is one of the best final acts in any Halloween movie. Even though Resurrection exists, and it literally did a 360 on what happened at the end of this movie, where they gave a bullshit reasoning to have it not happen. But if you look at this movie on its own, where Laurie Strode decapitates Michael Myers for good, she kills him for good, it is the perfect ending for this franchise. The only thing I don't like about this movie is that they retcon 4, 5, and 6. And it really pissed me off, because the daughter angle, having Jamie being dead, maybe that would have really helped Laurie Strode even more in how traumatized she is, that she doesn't have a daughter anymore either, but she has one son. That would have worked even better. So I hate that they ignore continuity, but that's a little qualm, because the new one did the same thing, but it ignored every film except for the first movie. So it's not as insulting, funny enough. This one's just insulting because it ignored 3 movies that were in between 2 and H2O, so it's like, why ignore those? People, they were just lazy enough not to watch those movies, I guess. That's literally probably the reason, but I love H2O. Fantastic final act, fantastic performance by Jamie Lee Curtis. I like the use of not as much gore. Really like the side characters. Really love it, just everything about it. I think this is a great movie. It's not really scary, but I love the fact that this has some dignity in terms of the horror genre, like with acting, performances, not that much use of gore when a time gore was really important. Really love everything about H2O. Really a fantastic Halloween movie. And that is my number 20 to number 11. So tell me down below what you think of my ranking. I know people are going to be like, how dare you say this and this? Or people are going to be like, yeah, I respect you for that. So I had fun doing this ranking. Next up will be my number 10 through number 1. So stay tuned for that. And thank you guys so much for watching.